Hey everybody, it's Sophia. It's September and it's my last year of high school, so things could not be busier for me. But I was asked by my producers at CBC Kids News if I wanted to take on this new opportunity to interview a residential school survivor. If I'm being honest, I was really hesitant at first. This is a topic that is so close to home, so tragic, and so hard to talk about that I honestly didn't think it could be worth it. I want to do the story justice, while being sensitive to my own background, as well as the survivor's story. I needed to know, how could I tell this story in a good way? As part of this journey, I'm going to talk to 3 different experts who have experience in having these kinds of conversations. So come with me as I prepare to have hard conversations in a healthy way. I started off by talking to journalist Duncan McHugh, who's been a journalist for more than 25 years.
Over the years, I've reported a lot of stories about residential schools.
We have to keep telling those stories so that we understand what our immediate ancestors went through, right? But also so that Canadians understand, so that we don't forget and we understand the work that's ahead of us.
I wanted to ask you how bringing light to a lot of our stories, and specifically harder stories like our residential school stories, has impacted you.
It affects my heart to hear a survivor share their story. I think over the years, I began to understand that the more important thing about interviewing survivors is making sure that they're okay. It's really easy to treat stories as objects to be acquired. We're doing our work and we think we're doing it for important reasons, but it's really important to remember after you're finished interviewing, how did that impact the person that shared the story with you? Are they sitting up and worrying about it? Did it trigger memories for them that they now need to cope with and deal with? Checking back in with someone, saying, are you okay? Do you have someone to talk to? Do you have support? Checking in with them a day, 5 days later, 2 weeks later, a day before it goes to air, like your story goes to air. All of those things are not part of the typical journalistic playbook. And we need to incorporate those things into our practice to make sure that we don't hurt those people any more than they were already hurt.
Do you have any specific advice for the person giving the interview, for me?
After you do a big, long interview, I learned that it was important that I take a break, go outside, go get some exercise, reconnect with ceremony, do all of those things that you need to have a healthy mind, body, spirit, so that you can do the work in a good way and honor the stories of the survivors that they shared with you.
Next, I asked for advice from Connie Walker, who's a journalist who's been sharing Indigenous stories for decades.
I've done a lot of reporting on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but I've never heard a story like this before.
I think that it's so important for Indigenous youth to know the truth about what survivors and what our ancestors and what our families and communities have been through in Canada.
When I was first approached with this idea and this topic, I kind of had a lot of hesitation with the idea of getting the story across in the right way, in a respectful way, and in a safe way without having to sacrifice the truth of it. So can you speak a little bit about that?
One of the hardest things that you can do as an interviewer is actually really listen to the people that you're interviewing. And I always try to make sure that I'm trying to look for cues that they're giving about how they're feeling about things, and to reassure them, to say, if you need some time, like absolutely we can take some time. If you're not comfortable talking about anything, like just let me know. I want to make sure that they understand that they have all of the agency, they have all of the power and control in this interview, that I don't want to do it unless they're feeling safe and comfortable and willing. But I think, approaching the interview in the way that you've approached this entire story, with care and sensitivity, is really important. And you've already shown that that's the good way that you want to do this work. And so I think you'll be in good hands.
Finally, I spoke to Anika Harrison, an Indigenous teen who won an award for her documentary on her dad, talking about his time at residential school.
My dad mentioned that another boy once asked him to try to escape, but my dad said no.
I was asked by one of the boys, come with us, we're gonna run away. And I said no. I said my father told me not to run away.
I went into the interviews not knowing how they would actually affect me. I put up a barrier to kind of so that I could get through the interviews and the process making the documentary. But then after I made the documentary, after it was all finished, I really felt like it really took a toll on me and my mental health.
I'm heading into an interview with a residential school survivor, and I was wondering if you have any specific advice for me and maybe what you would consider doing differently if you had the chance to do the documentary over again.
So I definitely get where you're coming from, having that responsibility, having that need to get it right and do it right and bring justice. I went into the interviews with intention. I thought about the questions and I thought about what they meant to me, what they would mean to the survivors, what they would mean to people who watched the documentary. I kind of let my dad and my other interviewee just talk. They know their story, they went through it. So giving them the freedom to say what they need to say.
For these kinds of topics, these heavier topics like residential school, why do you think it's important for people in our generation to have these conversations?
I feel like teaching the new generation about residential schools will stop history from repeating itself, and it will help heal the intergenerational trauma.
Over the course of my 3 interviews, I learned a lot about the process, and am feeling more confident about taking on this challenging assignment. I don't think these stories will ever get easier to tell, but I am feeling more prepared. My next step is a one-on-one interview with residential school survivor Doreen Bernard. She is a Mi'kmaq elder who attended residential school when she was just 4 years old. You can see our conversation and how it went in the next video. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. That's it for CBC Kids News. I'm Sophia Smoke, signing off.